more often than not, your instinct is right. And when you learn to listen to it and learn to just lean in the moment, it won't really, in that moment, it won't look like oh my gosh, should I turn this way or should I turn this way? Which decision do I make? And how will that impact the future? It doesn't always feel that black and white. I would say it's really kind of in the moment. Does this feel right?
Hi, and welcome to Voices for Impact. My name is Danielle Mensing, founder of Voices for Impact, and today I'm chatting with my friend Ben Conard. His passion for fair trade has taken him to the TEDx stage and on the ground to farms in Ecuador and artisan workshops in India. As a U.S. ambassador for the 33rd Congress Bundestag, did I say that right?
Bundestag, yeah, close enough.
Bundestag Youth Exchange. Ben spent a year in Germany representing the U.S. to strengthen diplomatic relations. And as a human rights activist, he was named 40 LGBT leaders under 40 by Business Equality magazine. Ben also founded 5 North Chocolate Snack.
You need a visual.
An award-winning certified LGBT business enterprise. And 5 North has been featured by Forbes, President Clinton, Donna Karan, Entertainment Weekly, Bank of America, and that's just to name a few. So Ben, thank you so much for coming on today and having a conversation with me.
Thanks so much for having me, Danielle. And I had no idea that my bio had so many tongue twisters. So that's probably something that I should change.
I love it. I love it. So tell me, how did you get involved in fair trade and in your human rights work?
Yeah, I mean, I had been a long time fair trade advocate. I started honestly working in a small retail store in my hometown, honestly just representing artisan goods from around the world and understanding their stories and learning how supply chains really do affect these individuals on the ground. I was an intern for the World Fair Trade Organization, and then started working for lots of different ethical companies who really cared about their supply chains. And then I actually went to India and I saw on the ground how artisans and producers treated fairly versus, inhumanely, how this affects them and their own communities, and farmers in Ecuador too. So seeing that happen on the ground really just strengthened me as an advocate and an activist for something like fair trade. So that was kind of the start of that. I knew that if I was going to be an entrepreneur, I needed to include, these things that I felt passionate about in whatever it was I was creating for the world. And then on the other end of my quote unquote human rights work, as an individual who identifies as part of the LGBT community, it was important for me to be my true and authentic self. And that led me to realize that I have a voice in the business community, that I'm responsible for sharing and for sharing in the most authentic way possible that lifts those around me, and those who might not have that voice.
Now, when you say inhumane fair trade or inhumane trading, what does that look like? Could you describe that to me versus fair trade?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, traditional supply chains really do put a lot of pressure on farmers and producers in the developing world. So, lots of big companies really are the ones controlling a lot of the commodities that are traded on the market today. And as those companies are fighting for higher market shares in whatever it is that they're trading, they are squeezing out the farmers and the producers on the other end. So they are really decreasing those wages. They're forcing child labor. I mean, how else can a family support themselves if they're not, putting all of the labor that they have to work on the farm? And that's where, the systemic child labor really does come from. And we have to, figure out a way to root that out. In a lot of these developing world countries too, women aren't represented on the ground the way that they should be. And that's another inhumane practice in the workplace. So I think that there's a lot of different aspects that come to understand like how we're treating workers and farmers and producers on the ground. And fair trade really is working against all of those detriments that I just listed.
Now, why chocolate? What got you started in creating this type of business venture with chocolate snacks?
That's a really fair question, Danielle. And I would say I ask myself the same question, like why am I doing this, and why did I choose not only a food product but a temperature sensitive food product, and something that is that has a particularly challenging supply chain and a particularly competitive marketplace. So why chocolate is actually a really great question, but it all started as a college student. I was really just dissatisfied with the idea that candy was always a guilty indulgence. And it was, it was that really, it was that idea that something that we love and consume every single day has so many factors of guilt built into it. Whether it be the ingredients, like lots of sugar, high in fat or artificial ingredients. And then the other factor of guilt is the supply chain, knowing that there are lots of child farmers still, working farms in West Africa and Latin America. Those two things I didn't agree with, being in the 21st century, that we still have to feel guilty about consuming one of our favorite treats. So I wanted to change that.
What excites you about creating or starting your own business venture? Take me through the process of creating this product.
Yeah. I would say in the very beginning, it really was all experimental. The plan was really not ever to create a booming business out of it or to get onto the shelves of grocery stores. I mean, that's kind of part of the vision in the very beginning, but certainly not on paper yet. So the idea first was like, how can we create something different and unique? And then experimenting and iterating that to actually bring it to life. So I think, so many ideas just go to the wayside, and people don't actually take their idea to action. You tinker with it, you think about it, but you don't normally take it to the shelf or bring it to life, because it's a scary thing, and it's actually a really hard thing too.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, like, in the very beginning, it was really all about like, how can we take this from idea to actual physical representation of the idea.
What challenges have you overcome in your life? And it could be dealing with the chocolate snacks, or outside of that, to get to where you are now. And how have you moved through those challenges?
I want to share a really powerful piece of advice that someone shared with me a couple of years ago. And it is this idea that there are two different kinds of doubt that lots of entrepreneurs suffer from. There's idea doubt, and there's self-doubt. Idea doubt needs to be dealt with, it needs to be fixed, and it needs to be changed. If you doubt your idea, there's probably a really good reason why you're doubting it. And that can be solved by fixing the problem that you're working on the spot. The other form of doubt is self-doubt. The understanding that you believe you are not the person to take this on, you are not capable of actually bringing your idea to life.
Mm-hmm.
And self-doubt needs to just be thrown out. Self-doubt is fake. Self-doubt is completely built from within. And when you realize these two different pieces of how we feel about our creation or our idea in the moment, it really helps, I think, contextualize like what your next steps are, what's slowing you down and what's holding you back. I don't even know if I answered your question, but I really wanted to share that advice.
That is really good advice. My question was like, how did you get through challenges? But I think like that's a really big challenge that a lot of people face, is moving through your own internal conversation you have with yourself, which is self-doubt, or especially when you're an entrepreneur and creating your own product, that idea doubt. That's really interesting. Now, how do you also keep a positive mindset when you're starting a business and you've done all the things you've done? I think sometimes there can be a lot of roadblocks. How do you continuously get yourself in that mindset of just keep going and have a positive outlook?
I think so much of what we deal with as an entrepreneur on a day-to-day basis is super challenging, and it is deterring. And there are so many moments where you don't have a positive outlook on what's happening or what's to come. My biggest piece of advice is to find your own therapy. Find, like, it's different for everyone, and so I wouldn't sit here and pretend like I know who needs what in the moment. For me, it's running. I need an outlet where I can have physical exercise. I can be outside. I can be alone. I can be listening to music. I can let my thoughts run through my head without really any interruption. To me, that's my therapy. But it could be different for anyone. And I would say finding that early on and using that to your advantage is so, so, so powerful. So I would say find your therapy.
That's really good piece of advice. Now, what advice would you give to somebody who's wanting to become an entrepreneur or business owner?
I would say I have two versions of my advice, right? One, don't do it, which really I'm saying that only because now I can look back and realize it's really hard. And in some cases, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But on the flip side, my other piece of advice is just do it. Just start somewhere. There will never be a perfect time to start a business or to create an idea or to put something out in the world. There will never be a perfect time for that, because you're either, I think you are often coming up early in the market where you're sharing an idea that's new enough that it's exciting and unique, but it's also, it doesn't have a place in the market yet. So
Yeah.
people question it. So the timing will never be right to introduce a new product to market. It will also never be personally or professionally right in your own life. You'll never have enough time, enough energy, enough money to, or at least in your head, to bring this idea to life. So I think it's important just to start somewhere, and realize that if you don't, you never really will.
Yeah. Now, you talked a little bit about this earlier, to just do it and just take action. Is that kind of the philosophy you've lived by with starting this and the other things that you've done as a human rights activist and the TEDx stage and everything? Is that your mentality of just, take your fears and pass them aside and go for it?
Yeah, it's a little bit of that, and it's also a little bit of really leaning into your gut instinct. I would say more often than not, your instinct is right. And when you learn to listen to it and learn to just lean in the moment, it won't really, in that moment, it won't look like oh my gosh, should I turn this way or should I turn this way? Which decision do I make? And how will that impact the future? It doesn't always feel that black and white. I would say it's really kind of in the moment. Does this feel right? I'll give an example. When we became the first brand to put the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce seal on a package, it wasn't really a monumental decision that I was making when we were designing our new package. It wasn't this aha moment of, wow, like I need to get this on our package, and this will really change the game, and this will be a really cool thing to announce. That really wasn't how that went. It just kind of felt right in the moment, and I was like, oh yeah, we should probably incorporate an element like this, and oh, that would be a great idea here. But I didn't even think to announce it when it happened. I didn't think to understand the repercussions that would come with it. It was really just a matter of like, this feels right in the moment, so I'm going to give it a try and see what happens. And I would say more often than not, those are how those decisions are made.
Mm-hmm. And that decision did get you a lot of notoriety and recognition of your product, because wasn't there an article in Forbes about that?
Yeah, that was our first and so far only feature in Forbes, and that was
More to come.
yeah. Love the attitude. That was a really cool moment for us to wake up to something like Forbes featuring what we were doing. It definitely gave us a lot of credibility too. I think that was really important in the space that we were entering. And it made me feel a heck of a lot more responsible for making that decision.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize what kind of came with doing that until it really happened and people took to it.
What do you think is that skill that you have within you that's helped you succeed and accomplish your goals up until this point?
I guess that's a good question. But I don't know. It's hard, I think, to pinpoint one specific skill that really um, kind of moves you forward. I would say I'm always a huge proponent for great communication skills. I think that is just so powerful, not only in the moment in sales when you're trying to close a deal or introduce someone to something, but also like, how do we communicate with our customers? How do we communicate our brand? How do we communicate this on our package, in writing, on our website, on any of our materials that are public? How do we communicate this over email to a potential customer or a potential account? What does this look like in the larger context of a customer like Bank of America? These are, I think, all of these moments require great communication skills, to understand how different people are going to be absorbing that content, and what it means to them. So I
Mm-hmm.
would say, if in any way you're able to invest in your own way of communicating, learning a second language, reading,
Mm-hmm.
um, meeting and being with more people really can help fine tune those skills.
What is the most common reason you think people fail or give up on their dreams?
I think you get tired. um, I think it can be really challenging when you don't have um, kind of a regular cadence of wins along the way. It can be disappointing and deterring to not have things turn out the way that you thought that they might in a certain amount of time. I would say that if you're able to push through a longer amount of those results and reactions, you eventually are able to pull out the good and kind of push back the bad. So I would say probably the reason that most people are failing or maybe leaving their venture, is because they just experience too much of the smaller disappointments along the way. And those suck. I know them quite well. But the successful parts and the exciting parts and the good parts, that happen in between as well, need to be kind of celebrated and then magnified as you go forward.
My last question is, how do you define success?
I think if you asked me this question a couple years ago, I might have defined success with some relatively boilerplate language for you, Danielle. But I think, today I would very carefully define success, in a non-comparative way. I think so often we create this idea of success as being something that someone else has, and now I'm trying to achieve it too. But what we don't realize is that success comes in so many forms, and it's really more of a feeling than it is a measurement.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for anyone to judge what that feeling should be for anyone else is wrong. So I think first and foremost, we need to just define success for ourselves. And whatever that might be is totally acceptable. For some people, it's, making enough money. For some, it's having free time. For others, it's having the freedom to make decisions and the autonomy to do as they see fit in an organization. And for some, it's a combination of all of that, or none of it. And I think as soon as we realize that success comes, as corny as it sounds, success comes from within.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that we feel and experience. And it's not a matter of, getting on the cover of Forbes or, becoming, I don't know, the richest man in the world. Like, those are not, to me, measurements of real success. It really depends on the person, because we don't know. The richest man in the world might not even feel successful.
Mm-hmm.
That might not be what would make them the happiest, and it might not be what would make them the most successful in their own mind. So I would say find it for yourself first. if anyone, or if any of these topics or anything that I talked about kind of excites anyone listening right now, feel free to reach out. I'm really easy to find on LinkedIn or social media or in my email inbox. So those are, places that I love to continue the conversation and find out who's listening.
And find Ben's IG handle below on this post. Thank you so much, Ben, for taking the time to talk with me today and give us some insight into what you do and just give us some really great advice. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Danielle, for having me. I really appreciate it.
And thank you so much to our viewers who are watching. Voices for Impact is on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So please follow and like us to stay connected. See you next time on Voices for Impact.